Hello, senior squirrels, ninny juniors that like to listen. This is Little Women. I didn't read very much, really, of chapter 11, Experiment, so I can finish that up, and then we'll see what we'll do about 12. I'll probably read the first part of 12, if I can. And I may be rereading over part of what I read before. Don't know. I need to start putting stickies in here on the book of exactly where I was. That was a good thing about reading on the Kindle. I could underline or highlight or whatever. But I like to read out of here. Okay, Meg worked it up. She's talking about bread. Set it on the hearth for a second rising and forgotten it. Meg was entertaining Sally Gardner in the parlor when the door flew open, and a flowery, crocky, flushed and disheveled figure appeared, demanding tartly, "I say, isn't bread riz enough when it runs over the pans?" Sally began to laugh, but Meg nodded and lifted her eyebrows as high as they would go, which caused the apparition to vanish, and put the sour bread into the oven without further delay. Mrs. March went out after peeping here and there to see how matters went, also saying a word of comfort to Beth, who sat making a winding sheet while the dear departed lay in state in the domino box. A strange sense of helplessness fell upon the girls as the gray bonnet vanished around the corner and despair seized them, when a few minutes later Miss Crocker appeared and said she'd come to dinner. Now this lady was a thin, yellow spinster with a sharp nose and inquisitive eyes who saw everything and gossiped about all she saw. They disliked her, but had been taught to be kind to her simply because she was old and poor and had few friends. So Meg gave her the easy chair and tried to entertain her while she asked questions, criticized everything, and told stories of the people whom she knew. Language cannot describe the anxieties, experiences, and exertions which Jo underwent that morning, and the dinner she served up became a standing joke. Fearing to ask any more advice, she did her best alone and discovered that something more than energy and goodwill is necessary to make a cook. She boiled the asparagus for an hour and was grieved to find the heads cooked off and the stalks harder than ever. The bread burnt black, for the salad dressing so aggravated her that she let everything else go till she had convinced herself that she could not make it fit to eat. The lobster was a scarlet mystery to her, but she hammered and poked till it was unshelled, and its meager proportions concealed in a grove of lettuce leaves. The potatoes had to be hurried not to keep the asparagus waiting, and were not done at last. The blancmange was lumpy, and the strawberries not as ripe as they looked, having been skillfully deaconed. I guess it means decapped. It says deaconed. Guess I'm missing something. Well, they can eat beef and bread and butter if they're hungry, only it's mortifying to have to spend your whole morning for nothing, thought Jo as she rang the bell half an hour later than usual and stood hot, tired, and dispirited, surveying the feast spread for Laurie, accustomed to all sorts of elegance, and Miss Crocker, whose curious eyes would mark all failures and whose tattling tongue would report them far and wide. Poor Jo would gladly have gone under the table as one after another was tasted and left, while Amy giggled, Meg looked distressed, Miss Crocker pursed up her lips, and Laurie talked and laughed with all his might to give a cheerful tone to the festive scene. Jo's one strong point was the fruit, for she had sugared it well and had a pitcher of fresh cream to eat with it. Her hot cheeks cooled a trifle, and she drew a long breath as the pretty glass plates went round, and everyone looked graciously at the little rosy islands floating in a sea of cream, Miss Crocker tasted first, made a wry face, and drank some water hastily. Joe, who had refused, thinking there might not be enough, for they dwindled sadly after the picking over, glanced at Laurie, but he was eating away manfully, though there was a slight pucker about his mouth. I'm sorry, but I can just imagine that meal. Bless her heart. That gossip they had there eating it. But Laurie was eating away manfully, though there was a slight pucker about his mouth, and he kept his eye fixed on his plate. Amy, who was fond of delicate fare, took a heaping spoonful, choked, hid her face in her napkin, and left the table. "Oh, what is it?" exclaimed Joe, trembling. "Salt instead of sugar, and the cream is sour," replied Meg with a tragic gesture. Joe uttered a groan and fell back in her chair, remembering that she had given a last hasty powdering to the berries out of one of the 2 boxes of the kitchen table, and had neglected to put the milk in the refrigerator. She turned scarlet and was on the verge of crying when she met Laurie's eyes, which would look merry in spite of his heroic efforts. The comical side of the affair suddenly struck her, and she laughed till the tears ran down her cheeks. So did everyone else, even Croker, as the girls called the old lady, and the unfortunate dinner ended gaily with bread and butter, olives, and fun. "I haven't strength of mind enough to clear up now, so we will sober ourselves with a funeral," said Joe as they rose, and Miss Croker made ready to go, being eager to tell the new story at another friend's dinner table. They did sober themselves for Beth's sake. Laurie dug a grave under the ferns in the grove. Little Pip was laid in with, remember, the bird had died because she had forgotten to feed it, or didn't, I guess forgotten, with many tears by his tender-hearted mistress, and covered with moss, while a wreath of violets and chickweed was hung on the stone which bore his epitaph, composed by Joe while she struggled with the dinner. "Here lies Pip March, who died the 7th of June, loved and lamented sore, and not forgotten soon." At the conclusion of the ceremonies, Beth retired to her room, overcome with emotion and lobster. But there was no place of repose, for the beds were not made, and she found her grief much assuaged by beating up pillows and putting things in order. Meg helped Joe clear away the remains of the feast, which took half the afternoon, and left them so tired that they agreed to be contented with tea and toast for supper. Laurie took Amy to drive, which was a deed of charity, for the sour cream seemed to have had a bad effect upon her temper. Mrs. March came home to find the 3 older girls hard at work in the middle of the afternoon, and a glance at the closet gave her an idea of the success of one part of the experiment. Before the housewives could rest, several people called, and there was a scramble to get ready to see them. Then tea must be got, errands done, and one or two were necessary, bits of sewing neglected till the last minute. As twilight fell, dewy and still, one by one they gathered in the porch where the June roses were budding beautifully, and each groaned or sighed as she sat down, as if tired or troubled. "What a dreadful day this has been," began Joe, usually the first to speak. "It has seemed shorter than usual, but so uncomfortable," said Meg. "Not a bit like home," added Amy. "It can't seem so without Marmee and little Pip," sighed Beth, glancing with full eyes at the empty cage above her head. Here's mother, dear, and you shall have another bird tomorrow, if you want it." As she spoke, Mrs. March came and took her place among them, looking as if her holiday had not been much pleasanter than theirs. "Are you satisfied with your experiment, girls, or do you want another week of it?" she asked as Beth nestled up to her, and the rest turned toward her with brightening faces as flowers turn toward the sun. "I don't," cried Joe decidedly. "Nor I," echoed the others. "You think, then, that it is better to have a few duties and live a little for others, do you?" Lounging and larking don't pay, observed Jo, shaking her head. I'm tired of it and mean to go to work at something right off. Suppose you learn plain cooking. That's a useful accomplishment, which no woman should be without, said Mrs. March, laughing inaudibly at the recollection of Jo's dinner party, for she had met Miss Crocker and heard her account of it. Mother, did you go away and let everything be just to see how we'd get on? Cried Meg, who'd been suspicious all day. Yes. I wanted you to see how the comfort of all depends on each doing their share faithfully. While Hannah and I did your work, you got on pretty well, though I don't think you were very happy or amiable. So I thought, as a little lesson, I would show you what happens when everyone thinks only of herself. Don't you feel that it is pleasanter to help one another, to have daily duties which make leisure sweet when it comes, and to bear and forbear that home may be comfortable and lovely to us all? We do, Mother, we do, cried the girls. Then let me advise you to take up your little burdens again, for though they seem heavy sometimes, they are good for us, and lighten as we learn to carry them. Work is wholesome, and there is plenty for everyone. It keeps us from ennui, E-N-N-U-I-E, I'm sure I'm saying that, and mischief, is good for health and spirits, and gives us a sense of power and independence better than money or fashion. We'll work like bees and love it too. See if we don't, said Jo. I'll learn plain cooking for my holiday task, and the next dinner party I have shall be a success. I'll make the set of shirts for Father instead of letting you do it, Marmee. I can, and I will, though I'm not fond of sewing. That will be better than fussing over my own things, which are pretty nice enough as they are, said Meg. I'll do my lessons every day and not spend too much time with my music and dolls. I am a stupid thing and ought to be studying, not playing, was Beth's resolution, while Amy followed their example by heroically declaring, I shall learn to make buttonholes and attend to my parts of speech. Very good, and I'm quite satisfied with the experiment and fancy that we shall not have to repeat it. Only don't go to the other extreme and delve like slaves. Have regular hours for work and play. Make each day both useful and pleasant, and prove that you understand the worth of time by employing it well. Then youth will be delightful. Old age will bring few regrets, and life become a beautiful success in spite of poverty. We'll remember, Mother. And they did. I like that chapter. Okay, chapter 12 is a long one, so as much as I hate to have part 1s and 2s and all that, I mean, this goes from page 186 to 216, so I'll start chapter 12. So I have to remember to title this Chapter 11, Part 2, and 12, Part 1. Camp Lawrence. Beth was postmistress. For being most at home, she could attend to it regularly, and dearly liked the daily task of unlocking the little door and distributing the mail. One July day, she came in with her hands full and went about the house, leaving letters and parcels like the penny post. Here's your posy, Mother. Laurie never forgets that, she said, putting the fresh nosegay in the vase that stood in Marmee's corner and was kept supplied by the affectionate boy. Miss Meg March, 1 letter and a glove, continued Beth, delivering the articles to her sister, who sat near her mother stitching wristbands. Why, I left a pair over there, and here's only 1, said Meg, looking at the gray cotton glove. Didn't you drop the other in the garden? No, I'm sure I didn't, for there was only 1 in the office. I hate to have odd gloves. It's like having odd socks. Never mind, the other may be found. My letter is only a translation of the German song I wanted. I think Mr. Brooke did it, for this isn't Laurie's writing. Mrs. March glanced at Meg, who was looking very pretty in her gingham morning gown, with the little curls blowing about her forehead, and very womanly as she sat sewing at her little work table full of tidy white rolls. So unconsciously of the thought in her mother's mind, she sewed and sung while her fingers flew, and her thoughts were busied with girlish fancies as innocent and fresh as the pansies in her belt. That Mrs. March smiled and was satisfied. Thus, 2 letters for Dr. Joe, a book, and a funny old hat, which covered the whole post office, stuck outside, said Beth, laughing as she went into the study where Joe sat writing. What a sly fellow Laurie is. I said I wished bigger hats were the fashion because I burn my face every hot day. He said, why mind the fashion? Wear a big hat and be comfortable. I said I would if I had one, and he has sent me this to try me. I'll wear it for fun and show him I don't care for the fashion. And hanging the antique broad brim on a bust of Plato, Joe read her letters. One from her mother made her cheeks glow and her eyes feel, for it said to her, my dear, I write a little word to tell you how much satisfaction I watch your efforts to control your temper. You say nothing about your trials, failures, or successes, and think perhaps that no one sees them but the friend whose help you daily ask, if I may trust the well-worn cover of your guidebook. I, too, have seen them and heartily believe in the sincerity of your resolution since it begins to bear fruit. Go on, dear, patiently and bravely, and always believe that no one sympathizes more tenderly with you than your loving, and it was signed, Mother. That does me good. That's worth millions of money and pecks of praise. Oh, Marmee, I do try. I will keep on trying and not get tired, since I have you to help me. Laying her head on her arms, Joe wet her little romance with a few happy tears, for she had thought no one ever saw and appreciate her efforts to be good. With this assurance was doubly precious, doubly encouraging, because unexpected and from the person whose commendation she most valued. Feeling stronger than ever to meet and subdue her Apollyon, she pinned the note inside her frock as a shield and reminder, lest she be taken unaware and proceed to open her other letter, quite ready for either good or bad news. In a big, dashing hand, Laurie wrote, Dear Joe, what ho! Some English girls and boys are coming to see me tomorrow, and I want to have a jolly time. If it's fine, I'm going to pitch my tent in Longmeadow and row up the whole crew to lunch and croquet, have a fire, make messes, gypsy fashion, and all sorts of larks. They are nice people with like such things. Brooke will go to keep us boys steady, and Kate Vaughn will play propriety for the girls. I want you all to come. Can't let Beth off at any price, and nobody shall worry her. Don't bother about rations. Food. I'll see to that. Oh, and everything else. Only do come. There's a good fellow. In a tearing hurry, yours ever, Laurie. Here's richness, cried Joe, flying in to tell the news to Meg. Of course we can go, Mother. It will be such a help to Laurie, for I can row. Oh, it was row and not row. And it will be such a help to Laurie. And did I read that twice? I'm trying to read. For I can row and Meg see to the lunch and the children be useful in some way. I hope the Vaughns are not fine grown-up people. Do you know anything about them, Joe? Asked Meg. Only that there are 4 of them. Kate is older than you, Fred and Frank, twins, about my age, and a little girl, Grace, who's 9 or 10. Laurie knew them abroad and liked the boys, I fancied, from the way he primmed up his mouth in speaking of her, that he didn't admire Kate much. I'm so glad my French print is clean. Her dress is just the thing and so becoming, observed Meg complacently. Have you anything decent, Joe? Scarlet and gray boating suit, good enough for me. I shall row and tramp about, so I don't want any starch to think of. You'll come, Bethy? If you won't let any of the boys talk to me. Not a boy? Not a boy. I like to please Laurie, and I'm not afraid of Mr. Brooke. He is so kind, but I don't want to play or sing or say anything. I'll work hard and not trouble anyone, and you'll take care of me, Joe. So I'll go. That's my good girl. You do try to fight off your shyness, and I love you for it. Fighting faults isn't easy, as I know. And a cheery word gives a lift. Thank you, Mother. And Joe gave the thin cheek a grateful kiss, more gracious to Mrs. March than if it had given her back the rosy roundness of her youth. I had a box of chocolate drops in the picture I wanted to copy, said Amy, showing her mail. And I got a note from Mr. Lawrence asking me to come over and play to him tonight before the lamps are lighted. And I shall go, added Beth, whose friendship with the old gentleman prospered finely. Now let's fly around and do double duty today so that we can play tomorrow with free minds, said Joe, preparing to replace her pen with a broom. When the sun peeped into the girls' room early the next morning to promise them a fine day, he saw a comical sight. Each had made such preparation for the fete as seemed necessary and proper. Meg had an extra row of little curl papers across her forehead. Joe had copiously anointed her afflicted face with cold cream. Beth had taken Joanna to bed with her to atone for the approaching separation, and Amy had capped the climax by putting a clothespin on her nose to uplift the offending feature. It was one of the kind artists used to hold the paper on their drawing boards, therefore quite appropriate and effective for the purpose to which it was now put. This funny spectacle appeared to amuse the son, for he burst out with such radiance, and its son, S-U-N, burst out with such radiance that Joe woke up and roused all her sisters by a hearty laugh at Amy's ornament, the clothespin on her nose. Sunshine and laughter were good omens for a pleasure party, and soon a lively bustle began in both houses. Beth, who was ready first, kept reporting what went on next door and enlivened her sisters' toilets by frequent telegrams from the window. There goes the man with the tent. I see Mrs. Barker's doing up lunch in a hamper and a great basket. Now Mr. Lawrence is looking up at the sky and the weathercock. You know, that like a weather vane tells you north, south, east, west. Weather vane. Okay. I wish he would go too. There's Laurie looking like a sailor. Nice boy. Oh, mercy me. Here's a carriage full of people, a tall lady, a little girl, and 2 dreadful boys. One is lame, poor thing. He's got a crutch. Laurie didn't tell us that. Be quick, girls. It's getting late. Why, there is Ned Moffat, I do declare. Look, Meg, isn't that the man who bowed to you one day when we were shopping? So it is. How queer that he should come. I thought he was in the mountains. Dear Sally, I'm glad she got back in time. Am I all right, Joe? Cried Meg in the flutter. A regular daisy. Hold up your dress and put your hat straight. It looks sentimental temp that way, and it will fly off at the first puff. Now then, come on. Joe, you ain't gonna wear that awful hat. It's too absurd. You shall not make a guy of yourself. Remonstrated Meg as Joe tied down with a red ribbon the broad-brimmed, old-fashioned leghorn Laurie had sent for a joke. I just will, though. It's capital. So shady, light, and big. It will make fun, and I don't mind being a guy if I'm comfortable. With that, Joe marched straight away, and the rest followed. A bright little band of sisters, all looking their best in summer suits with happy faces under the jaunty hat brims. Laurie ran to meet and present them to his friends in the most cordial manner. The lawn was the reception room, and for several minutes a lively scene was enacted there. Meg was grateful to see that Miss Kate, though 20, was dressed with a simplicity which American girls would do well to imitate, and she was much flattered by Mr. Ned's assurances that he came specially to see her. Joe understood why Laurie primmed up his mouth when speaking of Kate, for that young lady had a stand-off, don't-touch-me air, which contrasted strongly with the free and easy demeanor of the other girls. Beth took an observation of the new boys and decided that the lame one was not dreadful, but gentle and feeble, and she would be kind to him on that account. Amy found Grace, a well-mannered, merry little person, and, after staring dumbly at one another for a few minutes, they suddenly became very good friends. Tents, lunch, and croquet utensils had been sent on beforehand. The party was soon embarked, and the two boats pushed off together, leaving Mr. Lawrence waving his hat on the shore. Laurie and Joe rowed one boat, Mr. Brooke and Ned the other, while Fred Vaughn, the riotous twin, did his best to upset both by paddling about in a wherry like a disturbed water bug. Joe's funny hat deserved a word of thanks, for it was of general utility. It broke the ice in the beginning by producing a laugh. It created quite a refreshing breeze, flapping to and fro as she rode, and would make an excellent umbrella for the whole party if a shower came up, she said. Kate looked rather amazed at Joe's proceedings, especially as she exclaimed, "Christopher Columbus," when she lost her oar. And Laurie said, "My dear fellow, did I hurt you?" when he tripped over her feet in taking his place. But after putting up her glass to examine the queer girl several times, Miss Kate decided that she was odd but rather clever, and smiled upon her from afar. Meg in the other boat was delightfully situated, face to face with the rowers, who both admired the prospect and feathered their oars with uncommon skill and dexterity. Mr. Brooke was a brave, silent young man, with handsome brown eyes and a pleasant voice. Meg liked his quiet manners and considered him a walking encyclopedia of useful knowledge. He never talked to her much, but he looked at her a great deal, and she felt sure that he did not regard her with aversion. Ned, being in college, of course, put on all the airs which freshmen think. Ned, being in college, of course, put on the airs which freshmen think it their bounden duty to assume. He was not very wise, but very good-natured and merry, and altogether an excellent person to carry on a picnic. Sally Gardner was absorbed in keeping her white piqué dress, I guess that's right, clean, and chattering with the ubiquitous Fred, who kept Beth in constant terror by his pranks. It was not far to Longmeadow, but the tent was pitched and the wickets down by the time they arrived. A pleasant green field with 3 wide-spreading oaks in the middle and a smooth strip of turf for the croquet. "Welcome to Camp Lawrence," said the young host as they landed with exclamations of delight. "Brooke is commander-in-chief, and I am commissary general. The other fellows are staff officers, and you ladies are company. The tent is for your special benefit, and that oak is your drawing room. This is the mess room, and the third is the camp kitchen. Now let's have a game before it gets hot, and then we'll see about dinner." Frank, Beth, Amy, and Grace sat down to watch the game played by the other 8. Mr. Brooke chose Meg, Kate, and Fred, and Laurie took Sally, Joe, and Ned. The Englishers played well, but the Americans played better and contested every inch of the ground as strongly as if the spirit of '76 inspired them. Joe and Fred had several skirmishes and once narrowly escaped high words. Joe was through the last wicket and had missed the stroke, which failure ruffled her a good deal. Fred was close behind her, and his turn came before hers. He gave a stroke. His ball hit the wicket and stopped an inch on the wrong side. No one was very near, and running up to examine, he gave it a sly nudge with his toe, which put it just an inch on the right side. "I'm through. Now, Miss Joe, I'll settle you and get in first," cried the young gentleman, swinging his mallet for another blow. "You pushed it. I saw you. It's my turn now," said Joe sharply. "Upon my word, I didn't move it. It rolled a bit, perhaps, but that's allowed. Just stand off, please, and let me have a go at the stake." And I stop there. And we will be at "We Don't Cheat in America." And I'll try to remember that. All right. Hope you had a great day. The sun has gone down, but it's not quite nighttime yet. It's probably around 7-ish or so, maybe a little bit later. And I continue to try to stitch, only to find myself waking up minutes or hours or an hour later. And I did get this, which I was going to begin today, but it's a little bit late. And you gotta, did we do 2 stories? No, 1 story last night, 1 today. So sorry, juniors, but Granny's just too tired. And goodness, I didn't even put my squirrel thing on for you seniors, but I'm sure you'll forgive me. My squirrel scarf. I do love it, though, Lisa. I love you all. Thanks so much, Linda Osmond, for that wonderful, darn good yarn. Happy mail today. And I enjoyed our live today, though we were missing quite a few squirrels. So I'm hoping tomorrow's live at 5 we'll have more of our crew. All right, guys, be sweet. Don't be ugly. Love to all. Mwah.